about race in America, one response that is often mentioned in conversations about police brutality is addressing Black on Black crimes. So, this is a statement that distracts from the excessive force used by police officers and criticizes the way in which Black Americans resolve confrontation. And while race is often emphasized, a primary reason for the violence in American communities is poverty. And in this video, we will unpack why the focus on Black crimes is problematic and distracts from the real problem at hand: poverty.
People in poverty contend with many obstacles, including debt, hunger, unemployment, and mental stress. When people cannot meet their basic needs, they may turn to extreme measures. This creates a tragic cycle of violence, abuse, and crime. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, persons in poor households at or below the federal poverty level had more than double the rate of violent victimization as persons in high-income households. Many people may not realize what constitutes as poverty. According to U.S. Census Bureau, poverty is determined by the minimum cost of living, which is calculated by where you live and the dependents a person is responsible for. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 2 adults with a child who collectively earn $16,337 is considered in poverty. The threshold the U.S. Bureau considers for poverty might seem low to those that live above the poverty line and still struggle to meet their financial needs. Poverty especially affects Black Americans. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 25.2% of Baton Rouge is impoverished, and 55% of those in poverty are Black. Where one might look at the violence in the Black community and assume it is connected to race relations or violent tendencies, we can more directly tie this violence to poverty.
Throughout U.S. history, federal, state, and local actions have been made to disenfranchise Black Americans. It began with slavery, where slaves were considered property and were not able to obtain wealth. After slavery was abolished, African Americans were discouraged and even killed when they tried to obtain wealth or knowledge. Laws were developed called Black Codes, and these laws were used to limit the freedoms of Black Americans. Later, Jim Crow laws were used to enforce segregation and withhold resources from African Americans, which continued on to the Civil Rights Movement. So for years, Black Americans were not allowed to buy homes in white communities. And in some cities, interstates and highways were built to divide Black communities and separate them from white neighborhoods. For example, you may notice in Baton Rouge how the I-10 drives directly through the urban neighborhoods. So by building the interstate through a neighborhood, it prevented expansion, it lowered property values, and it enforced segregation. The interstate division is also seen in New Orleans, Louisiana. The I-10 interstate drives right through Treme neighborhood, which is the oldest African American neighborhood in the United States.
Post-Civil Rights Movement, when Black Americans tried to buy houses, realtors often avoided listings in white neighborhoods. When applying for loans, people of color were denied loans or offered subprime loans, which are loans with high interest rates. In 1930s, lenders rated neighborhoods on their property value and risk of lending based on how many people of color lived in the area. Neighborhoods that had majority people of color were redlined. While this label was banned by the Fair Housing Act of 1968, the effects of redlining had already infiltrated American neighborhoods. Pew Research Center also found that despite recent improvements, investigations have shown that bias still exists in the American home buying process. The Keep Out investigation in 2018 found that people of color are more likely to be denied loans than whites. Pew Research Center also found that despite recent improvements, Black and Hispanics still have a harder time of getting mortgages. These obstacles continue to segregate American neighborhoods and prevent growth in generational wealth.
So, this segregation causes people of color to primarily interact with other people of color, and for white people to primarily interact with other white people. And as such, it's not surprising that black on black crime exists, as violence happens where criminals live and to the people that they interact with. This is also true of white people, or Hispanic people, or Asian people, and as we discussed here, is most prevalent in the impoverished communities. So, similar efforts have been made in education, job, and legal representation in court. These efforts of disenfranchisement have left Americans divided and Black Americans disadvantaged. Poverty is the product of the intentional disenfranchisement of Black Americans, and this poverty has led to an increased rate in crime and violence. And while the crimes across the country are important to address, this does not negate the need to reform these institutions that perpetuate discrimination, such as the police system.